Hello, dear friends. Today we continue our acquaintance with the memoirs of Waffen SS Major General Kurt Meyer. Don't forget to rate the video and leave your opinion about this material. Well, let's begin. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we were able to get the entire battalion across the temporary bridge over the Malakna River. On its eastern bank, we managed to establish a bridgehead 3 kilometers wide. Witt's battalion joined us. The pursuit was to continue early in the morning. I was relieved to learn that our losses amounted to only 4 soldiers killed, and only one of the wounded died from his injuries. Soviet troops suffered enormous losses in manpower and equipment. It was difficult to count the prisoners. During the night, the battalion's position came under disturbing fire, the nature of which indicated the continuing retreat of Soviet troops. Based on the testimony of prisoners, the course of the fighting during this time, and data from frontline intelligence during the night, I concluded that the Russians were retreating. The advance of von Kleist's 1st Tank Group, which was advancing southeast from the Dnipropetrovsk bridgehead, was obviously taken into account by the Russian command. While it was still night, I withdrew the combat guard posts and prepared the battalion for the day's offensive. My soldiers knew that we were going to wedge ourselves deep into the battle lines of the retreating enemy, and that we might be dependent on our own resources for days on end. Attacks and counterattacks would follow one another, including, probably, brutal and merciless blows from behind. We wanted to confuse the Soviet troops, disrupt their plans, and deal them a fatal blow. As dawn broke, I looked at my sleeping soldiers, huddled and curled up next to their motorcycles, guns, and tanks, which, along with their raincoats, protected them from the night cold. As always, when I was faced with the need to make a decision, and the lives and deaths of my soldiers were in my hands, my whole body trembled, and I smoked cigarette after cigarette. The time before the first exchange of fire, the first combat contact with the enemy, always weighed on me like the heaviest burden. But once the battle was underway, and I was in the thick of it, that pressure seemed to evaporate. The soldiers of the engineering and sapper units moved forward, their strong backs bent under the weight of the explosives. A few hundred meters ahead of us was a crossing over an anti-tank ditch. It had been blown up during the night. We had to knock down the walls of the ditch into the ditch itself to level the steep edges and use the masses of crumbling earth to build a crossing. The motorcyclists were nearby, ready to rush across the ditch immediately. Our mortars and artillery were also ready to open fire. The hands of my watch moved inexorably forward, and night fell again, swallowing the light of day. Green bushes and trees loomed out of the darkness. A few isolated shots rang out from the Russians toward our bridgehead. The rooster crowed its morning greeting. Morning had come. I walked to my armored car, taking long strides with my stiff legs, and climbed into it. From there, I could see the thickets far beyond the anti-tank ditch and our sappers advancing. The armored vehicles silenced several enemy machine guns. The enemy's weak barrier had been broken, securing our crossing of the ditch. As expected, the Russians had retreated during the night, so it was clear that we would not encounter their main forces, at least not for the next 2 or 3 hours. That day, the 2nd Company of the 1st SS Reconnaissance Battalion was in the lead. I felt some uneasiness after the company got a new commander who had previously taught tactics at a military academy and was skeptical of my unconventional methods of warfare. I had another heart-to-heart talk with SS Hauptsturmführer L and told him not to stop without my order. He was to move forward at maximum speed in the designated direction. I moved with the front company. After a short battle near the village of Shiroki, the enemy's rearguard was crushed, and at 9 o'clock in the morning, we reached Astrakhanka. The The Russian prisoners captured by that time belonged to the 35th Rifle Regiment. The regiments were hastily retreating in a southeasterly direction. We entered the offensive zone of the 30th Division. An interesting, truly impressive picture appeared before us. As far as the eye could see, Russian units were running, driving, and riding eastward. An artillery unit with horse-drawn guns was descending the slope. The guns were swaying in different directions. It was trying to take up a firing position to meet us properly and disrupt our further movement. Russian mortars were firing at us, with mines landing dangerously close to our battalion. But the retreat of the Soviet troops turned into a disorderly flight when the commanders lost control of the situation. It would have been pointless to get involved in a firefight with the Russian rear guard and lose precious time. I ordered SS Hauptsturmführer L to continue the attack without slowing down and not to worry about the threat to our flank. My order and the corresponding signals to my young soldiers added fuel to the fire. The motorcyclists descended on the Soviet troops like a tropical storm and split the mass of fleeing people in two with their machine gun fire. Heavy armored vehicles were behind the motorcyclists' flanks, providing cover. Assault guns fired shells at distant targets. Enemy trucks carrying ammunition exploded with a roar, and artillery batteries formed a disorderly cluster of horses, crews, and guns. In the background, two old Soviet planes flew over the wide steppe like burnt moths. They did not dare to approach within range of our anti-aircraft guns. A few seconds later, Bremer was standing next to me. I pointed to the enemy artillery advancing to their positions and the advance units of our battalion disappearing in a cloud of dust. Words were unnecessary. What we had learned during long, grueling training sessions at training camps and on the firing range was now bearing fruit. Spreading out widely, the company rushed toward the firing guns. From the flanks, the company burst into the Russian artillery positions like a pack of wolves, silencing 6 guns. SS Obersturmführers Hess and Wolf were seriously wounded in hand-to-hand combat. Many Red Army soldiers were trudging westward with their hands raised. Everywhere the eye could see, Soviet troops were fleeing in disorder. Bremer raged like a hound let off its leash, leading his company into the thick of the crowd. Guderian's words were proven right again. The machine is a weapon. Our lightning speed literally demoralized the Soviet troops. I led the advance company and raced through the ranks of Soviet troops with my motorcycle couriers. The main forces of the battalion followed behind at 5-minute intervals. Ahead of us was a collective farm. Orchards and tall deciduous trees surrounded the peasant houses. As I approached this small group of houses, I began to have doubts. I saw no movement. There were no Soviet soldiers or civilians in sight. For some reason, I continued to have doubts, even though the 2nd Company of the 1st SS Reconnaissance Battalion had just passed through the village. Dust still hung in the air. What could we expect? Peter kept his foot on the pedal and didn't worry about my doubts. But after we passed the first house, I shouted, "Step on the gas! Get out of here!" The houses on the left and right were full of Russians. In the farmyard, I noticed a Russian radio station with its antenna still up. Apparently, we had driven right through the Russian command post, which the 2nd Company of the 1st SS Reconnaissance Battalion had wanted to leave for the other units of the battalion to destroy. Following my orders, the 2nd Company of the 1st SS Reconnaissance Battalion roared through the collective farm without stopping. Remembering the bitter experience of the incident on the Sever Highway, I tried to catch up with the Vanguard Company at top speed. The main forces of the battalion would have no problem smoking out the Russian headquarters. We breathed a sigh of relief when our armored car drove out into the open steppe, which, it should be noted, was uneven. To our right, in the southeast direction, the Russians continued to retreat. Behind us, and slightly to the right, we could hear the noise of the battle being fought by Bremer's company. The vanguard company was still not in sight. The new company commander quickly adapted to our style of combat. The motorcyclists seemed to be intoxicated by speed. In a small depression was the village of Inrievka. It stretched along the road. It seemed that this village was also deserted. At the fork in the road, we found an anti-aircraft gun with minor mechanical damage. Soon, it was up and running again. The artillery commander wanted to take the road to the east, even though the road to the south was actually the right one. It took some effort to get the artillerymen to take the correct road. They still tried to say something to me and continued to point east. Annoyed by the delay, I gestured for them to move where they were told, along the road to the south and at full speed. The artillery commander shrugged in agreement and followed my vehicle. The road ran parallel to a forest protection strip, which was probably no more than 5 meters wide and consisted of shrubs and scattered trees. The monotony of the landscape was broken up by small hills. In the lowlands, we came across a group of armed Soviet soldiers who were marching south and, seeing us, stopped dead in their tracks. I angrily gestured to the Soviet soldiers to drop their weapons and move north. At the same time, I began to express my dissatisfaction to my adjutant because the 2nd Company of the 1st SS Reconnaissance Battalion had not even disarmed these Russians. As soon as we left the lowlands, I noticed other Russians walking briskly away to the south, carrying their rifles with them. Some of the officers still had their tablets with them. At that point, I completely lost my patience and berated the commander of the 2nd Company of the 1st SS Reconnaissance Battalion. Of course, we had to move quickly, but not at the expense of not disarming the prisoners. The last platoon of the company had to be given this specific task. That's all for today. If you liked the video, please support it with a like and subscribe to the channel. See you all soon!